Welcome back, you lovely Marvels. How in the heck are you? Hi, Dana.
Hello, Gwen. How are you?
Good. I feel like it's really been forever that we've seen each other.
Yeah, and we both got the wear a bright color memo.
Without even talking to each other. We're connected on some universal plane.
That's right.
The cosmos.
Exactly.
Connected through the stars. Anyway, so NeuroMarvels and Marvels, thank you so much for all of your comments, especially those that are supportive and encouraging. Yeah. We really encourage those types of comments for the community. Yeah. And if you don't like what you hear, and obviously you don't have to like everything we say or even accept everything we say, I imagine Dana and I will say things that aren't going to align with everybody. Right. Sure. That's okay. And there's no forcing. You can stop listening or,
whatever.
Put whatever you like. But if you're going to leave a comment, leave a productive one. Even if it's a comment that disagrees or adds a differing opinion, we welcome that. Just do that in a productive and respectful way.
We'll do another episode on cyberbullying because that kind of brings.
We should do that.
Yeah,
let's do that. So I was talking to Dana about this because as I do my own work, and I've done this for a couple decades already, and I've only worked in the neurodiverse with the neurodiverse community. More and more of my clients are asking me questions about my own profile, which is so interesting. And it's made me think about, this idea of a continuum, right? Of neurotype. Mm-hmm. I think Dana and I both have a fundamental assumption that neurodiversity is normal. Yeah. That's the norm. Right.
Within the human experience. So
yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That there is neurological variability, and neurological variability is normal in the population. Mm-hmm. What exactly then makes you neurodiverse? Yeah. We kind of know what makes someone formally, and for those of you in the auditory world, I have air quotes on, up. What makes you what leads to a formal diagnosis, right? Yeah. Which is usually some sort of difficulty with function, at the core level. But what's the difference between should we think about things as neurotypical or neurodivergent, right? Mm-hmm. I mean,
well, it's sort of like what we say in our field is, does someone have the diagnosis or does someone have traits, right?
Yeah.
So just because and a lot of people will say, well, I have this one thing. The DSM says I have this. And I said, well, actually, if you read through that or the ICD, it'll say, you have to have 4 out of 5, or it'll say something like that. So the idea is you can reach a threshold for a formal diagnosis of something if there's enough there, versus you started out talking about things being normal or within human experience. So the idea of having traits or neurodivergent aspects, I think, is probably pretty common, pretty normal, without you owning the label of necessarily of being autistic, right?
Yep.
Or ADHD, because we think of those as those diagnoses, like you have a accumulation of enough of those things. But certainly having traits. I mean, my wife and I talk about this all the time. She absolutely has sensory sensitivities. And not just like, oh, I'm annoyed or I'm fried right now from working, so something's bothering me. But like oftentimes noises that are in the house, she'll notice before me, or they'll drive her crazy before they'll drive me crazy, and that kind of thing. So She's not autistic, she's not ADHD, but definitely can have some of those traits. And it can be like attention dependent, right? So she could not pick up on something in the house, a noise, but I pick up on it. And then as soon as I point her towards it, then it starts to drive her crazy, right?
Right. She's sensitized. Yeah.
Yeah. She doesn't have enough things, not even close to having enough things for the full diagnosis, and that she does like spending time. She does gravitate towards social things, but she can get her fill easily. She's more introverted, for example, needs downtime to recharge and that kind of stuff. So yeah, where is that edge between that formal diagnosis and some traits that folks can have? You talk about working a lot with neurodivergent folks, and I think that we all gravitate towards a population that we work with because we really get it on a fundamental level, right? So you can certainly
Yeah.
yoke to and understand sensory sensitivities and some of those other kinds of things. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
For me, like, I had trauma in my history, and it was my first big interest and still does. And the majority of people I see have trauma histories, right?
Yeah.
Anybody who's working in trauma, I can 99.999% guess that they have that in their own history. We just don't gravitate towards topics that we don't fundamentally jibe with. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
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 So it sort of makes sense, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, this kind of goes back to therapist fit, right? The
Mm-hmm.
idea that, how do you fit with your therapist,
Yeah.
who is usually in the position to be promoting the self-reflection,
Mm-hmm.
or the self-awareness or the self-knowledge. They're usually in those
Yeah.
positions to do that.
Yeah.
I think the other piece too is, I've just been realizing lately the things that I do that have compensated
Mm.
for some of my preferences. And I definitely have my own sensory preferences, but I
Such
realized
as?
after
Can you give us an
oh my
example?
gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, how much time do we have? No, well, there's a few things that I just actually realized. So, I just came off of a vacation and I was at
Mm.
Disney World. And
Mm.
I'm pretty auditorily sensitive, but I can really put up. I can hear things from very far away.
Mhm.
But there was in a line in a queue, it was this room with hundreds of people inside of it. And the talking
Mm.
was just at this, for whatever reason, and it didn't happen anywhere else but this particular
Yeah.
queue,
Yeah.
I felt agitated. Like I was
Yeah.
over, and maybe it was because, it was 92 degrees with like 80% humidity,
Yeah.
which
You had
feels
enough factors,
awful.
like, yeah,
Like I just
yeah,
had
yeah.
enough. And, I, thank goodness my husband had some noise canceling headphones, which I put in
Mm.
and I played an audiobook and it really very quickly
Ah.
helped me.
Oh,
But,
cool.
but that's not all the time for
Right.
me,
Right.
but when I came home, there were just certain things that I needed to have done, which is like, I needed to like vacuum I needed my house
Yeah.
to look a certain way.
Yeah.
And I just realized like, I'm someone who vacuums like 5 minutes every day.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
like
okay. Yeah.
weird stuff like that,
Well, like, I had to
or,
unpack all my stuff when I got home from the
oh yeah,
conference. Even though we were exhausted and was ready for
no,
bed, my
I'm the
wife went
same.
through something. I'm like, I have to unpack it. Yeah.
I can't
Mm.
have open suitcases. I can't
Yeah.
have visual clutter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I have these weird daily habits that
Mhm.
I do every day that keeps my home
Mhm.
very visually tidy. You
Mhm.
know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? And
Yeah.
so, but I get really annoyed when chairs are left out or cupboards are not closed. Like I have
Absolutely.
to really check my reactions to those things.
Right.
Um, and I know that that's not always normal. And it's interesting because it's a preference. It's just
Yeah.
I just do better that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I know
you
it's sort of like you
know,
can look at different cultures that do that too. I mean, I'm thinking some Norwegian cultures, it's very much about sparseness and not a
yeah,
lot of clutter. I mean, I
yeah,
gravitate towards that probably for lots of reasons. And then other cultures where it is like bright colors and lots of stuff and tchotchke everywhere. And um,
yeah,
I wonder what it's like for folks that does that. I was doing a lot of research that what we were talking about last time, which was time blindness, but
mm-hmm,
this concept of things that just sort of run in your background every day that you don't have to think about, and
yeah,
then things that you have your attention on, right? So, is that if folks don't like all that stuff, but they've grown up that way, or it's part of their culture, does it become a background factor for them? And it doesn't bother them the same as it might bother you or I, because I'm similar the same way. We don't have a lot of stuff out in our house. Clutter would bother me. So there's
Yeah.
so many factors that could go into it that could sort of
Yeah.
make one person neurodivergent or not, or approaching neurodivergence, sort of pop. And I'm thinking, like what you mentioned in that line, maybe there's a certain frequency of noise that got in.
Oh,
It was hot. If you've done other rides that day, I experienced this when I was at the conference this week. I found myself surprisingly in the continuing education sessions doing okay. The last day, there was a ton of people in the room. I always sit in the back, so I don't have anything behind me. And there were more people than there were chairs, and I was sort of okay with that. And then one guy came over, and I was near a big recycling bin, so I figured I'm safe. No one's going to be like right there. And then a guy came in and leaned on the bin, and was like 6'4" and was kind of, I could feel him like he was towering over me, and I'm like, I'm out. I just got up and left. So there really is, like, neurodivergent or not, quote, diagnosis. I think all of us have that to a certain extent. And then you have folks that don't have traits at all, that don't ever get affected by those things, and everything in
yeah.
between. And what you're talking about, I think maybe you lean towards or have some traits. And it's one of the things that makes you so really good at working with this community, because you get it, right? You know what that feels like. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been so interesting to, kind of be in a process of like having
Mm-hmm.
things trigger self-reflection, where,
Mm-hmm.
I never would dream to, carry noise canceling headphones with me anywhere outside of my house, really, which I know that's a very common experience
Yeah.
actually for my clients. Who carry a lot of different types of noise canceling devices, whether that's
Yeah.
headphones or earplugs or customized earplugs or, like these types of things.
Yeah.
And I don't, it's like, wow, am I a product of increasing self-awareness? Am I times getting older,
Yeah.
times, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
but I just found myself like, wow, this must be how it feels for some of my clients
Yeah.
in like other time, like all the time. Right. And it
Yeah.
was very
Yeah.
impending. It was
Yeah.
like impending doom. Like it lit
Yeah.
that noise. And I think you're right about the frequency and the amount of it
Yeah. 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 Right.
was it was heavy. Like
Yeah.
I needed to stop it. Like I needed to interrupt it in
Yep.
some way. And that
Right.
was really interesting.
It's as you're talking too, I'm thinking, um, being neurodivergent, like the label of that. At what point do you classify as being neurodivergent,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And do you have to meet a full diagnosis of something, or
Yeah.
can you call yourself neurodivergent because you have like sensory sensitivities? So I think in the larger, broader community, especially younger folks would say, "Oh, you're neurodivergent. If you have sensory sensitivities, if you have whatever, you're definitely neurodivergent." But then we can also talk about what is the label of that. Someone else who might just think, "Oh no, you have to be autistic to be neurodivergent." But then also ADHD is in there.
Yeah.
Complex trauma is eked in there, right? Because we see a ton
Yeah.
of sensitivities and other things from that. And can
Yeah.
it be just your neurology that you're wired that way, but the other aspects to meet a diagnosis, like the social aspects on that, aren't there? So it's really interesting to sort of shake out the carpeting, so to speak, and
Yeah.
change the definition of it and make people more aware that you can be neurodivergent, but not be that full diagnosis necessarily, right?
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. And I think, that's why, maybe it is this idea of there's no kind of like on off,
Yeah.
dichotomy, right? It's
Right.
it's
Right.
truly like this maybe from like a neurotypical to neurodivergent, spectrum.
Mhm.
And I even
Mhm.
feel like having it be two-dimensional like that's not even, even complex enough, Dana.
Yeah,
Like it's almost
absolutely.
like we need to like 3D render this in some
Totally.
way, shape, or form,
Totally. Yeah.
But, I think ultimately it's really back to understanding how you work and how you
Yeah.
work the best and
Yeah.
what are the things that are energy zappers and take energy from you? And then
Yeah.
how are you kind of unapologetically
Yeah.
respecting that for your own self-care?
Yeah.
And it was so interesting. It was cute. We've gotten some comments about people, giving examples about how they've been unapologetically doing what it is
Yeah.
that they need in public.
Yeah.
And how hard that switch was for them.
Yeah.
And they're not hurting anybody.
Right. Right.
It's just maybe it might just look odd, or there
Uh,
might be like a, you know what I mean,
yeah.
a stigma surrounding it. But I think that there is this piece of, I think we're also societally in this place where we're having conversations about labels
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
general,
Yeah.
and identity in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah.
And so this is just I think a really interesting time to
Yeah.
be having conversations.
It's so interesting. I mean, sort of like you said, being unapologetically or worried about judgment from out there. And I'm thinking of when I went on this trip, when we were leaving on the trip, well rested. It's like, we're at the airport on time. It's not a big deal. And now how they do the boarding, people that have children or disabilities,
Oh
and
yeah.
they actually say, or need extra time boarding.
Yeah.
On the way there, of course, I'm going to wait. The way back, I was completely fried. We had to sit in the airport for like 6 hours before, and I'm just like, oh my God, I just need to hold it together long enough to get home. And people were sort of crowding the door to get on, and it said that thing: people with disabilities, children, or who need extra time. And I kind of looked at my wife and I said, well, I'm disabled and I need extra time.
Yeah.
Is it okay for me to do this? And we both were like, would it be okay? What would people think? Would I have to give an explanation? And then we waited. I didn't do it. And in hindsight, again, I was okay when we were leaving and well rested. At what point do I give myself permission? This is
Yep.
a growth curve for me, and shows people how we're always growing, because there's so many other things
Yes.
that I've learned to be an advocate for myself and I put out there. But I'm still like hesitant in those kinds of scenarios. Like,
Yeah.
is this okay? Is it enough to do this? It's crazy. Yeah.
It's like the peril of the invisible or the hidden disability.
Totally. Yeah.
And it's, you're not in a you're not visibly disabled. You're not in a
Right.
wheelchair. You don't have a white cane. You're
Right.
not
Right.
like, and so it's different, and people make judgments about that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
how many dogs have we seen that wear vests that say, I think like not all disabilities are visible.
And there was actually
Um,
a PA announcement in our gate. The TV was scrolling through and one of them said, not all disabilities are visible. And I'm like, in this airport that has that as a PA, and I'm still like, no, I can't get out early.
yeah.
I think that the
Yeah.
stigma and the worry about the barrier that you would run into is so powerful. I mean, I was really experiencing that. And I just kind of want to put that out there for folks to
Yeah.
acknowledge that again, of how strong that barrier is. Right. It's really
Yeah.
hard.
And that, I mean, Dana, I mean, I know you and I've spoken about this in previous episodes, or, but even off camera, which is
Mhm.
the social pressure.
Oh my
What are the
God.
social
Yeah.
pressures that are experienced in
Yeah.
regards to the perception, our
Mhm.
perception of what others may or may not think about things, right?
Yeah,
Like this
I
is
had this whole fantasy
motivator.
like, "Oh, I'll show them my phone where I have my medical information, and it
Yeah.
has on there
Yeah.
autistic." That's where my
Yeah.
brain went. Like, that's what's
Yeah.
gonna
I
happen.
have
They're
to
gonna
prove
call
it.
Yeah, they're gonna call the police. This is being silly
Oh.
here, but I know that would never happen, but my brain
Yeah.
kinda goes, "They're gonna call security and say, you're one of those crazy
Yeah.
people on a plane that shouldn't be."
Yes.
So it's such and that stems out of, I think, that vulnerability of the label, the vulnerability of saying
Yeah.
that, or like you started with saying, I would never be someone who'd leave the house with noise canceling headphones. I have clients that do it all the time, but you needed them then, and it helped
I
you.
did.
And so,
Yeah,
what does that mean? Yeah, yeah,
yeah, well, that means this is why I have now started packing. After that day, I brought my headphones everywhere.
you always do it now. Yeah,
I
yeah,
always do, and it's funny, like the rest of the trip I didn't need them at all.
yeah, yeah,
It's just funny, like it's just one of those things. I mean, it just I think it's paying attention to
Yeah.
the way in which you work, and the way in which you work the best. And listen, if there are times that you're being called into something where you know it's going to be really taxing and it's going to be an energy suck,
Yeah.
is it meaningful to you? Like,
That's right.
is it something that you really want to do?
Yeah.
Sadly, if that's your job, then you might want to consider a different job.
Wouldn't that suck? I have noise sensitivity and I'm a construction worker and I do, oh my God. Yeah. None of that
I
is.
have a smell sensitivity and I'm a manicurist. I mean, I don't know. Like,
Oh, yeah.
these
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
things like, maybe that's just not, it's not your calling,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
what you're called to do. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Or
But it's
like
like
me,
kind
I,
of,
I, I left veterinary medicine because I have animal allergies. I found out later, right?
oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
it can be something like that that and it sort of dovetails into that idea of masking that we've talked about so many times. You can spend so much, especially of your early life, masking automatically that you don't realize until you start making some of these self accommodations for yourself. And then this is where people feel like they get worse for a while after they let themselves be themselves. It's just
Yes.
that you're letting those layers finally come up and you're being more authentic. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very natural process. And there's lots of reasons why we might mask. And that might be just
Mhm.
another episode we do, which is
Yeah.
there are
Yeah.
lots of reasons why people mask and have different
Right.
personas.
That's right.
Um, okay, you NeuroMarvels, be unapologetic,
Yeah. I like
about,
that.
and be quirky. No one gonna see you at home, vacuuming 5 minutes every day. That, of course, that's just a hypothetical situation for me.
Of course. Yeah, of course. You're not going to have to put all the dishes away before you go to bed.
Oh
You
my
know,
God.
that's not a thing. Yeah.
Obvious.
I
No,
think what
no,
we're
not that.
modeling here
No.
today is struggling is okay. You're not
Yeah.
always going to do what's ideal. I just want everybody to be
Yeah.
seen in the struggle by us talking about it's there
Yeah.
all the time. It's totally normal to be in
Yeah.
the struggle. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And we have it. And I think the more we resist what we
Mm,
need
yeah.
to take care of ourselves, that's when things get really
That's right.
funky.
That's right.
Anyway, all right, Marvels, we will see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye, everybody.